On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Svetlana Zavelskaya. She is the head of software engineering, data platform, and infrastructure at Quanata. And we're going to be talking about making the impossible possible, focusing on some narrow problems and bringing those to market. And we have an example of microloans that we'll dive into, and talk about also some of those POCs that are giving people problem, getting into production, and a few other things in there as well. So, Svetlana, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Amir. Very nice to be here.
Absolutely. All right, before we start, what does the company do?
Quanata does two major things. It has its own insurance line called High Road, and what's unique about it, it is a telematics-based insurance. So your cost of your insurance would directly correlate it with the quality of you as a driver. If you think about traditional insurance, they tend to punish you for bad behavior heavily. But think about, do we have any insurance that actually helping you and promoting a good behavior? And if you're a good driver, you get a discount monthly on your insurance rate.
Absolutely. That's actually a really good point. And that is actually, I'm sure a lot of people will be listening to this and thinking, yes, I definitely do have a good record and I don't see a break. I guess when we're talking about these type of problems, right? Sometimes we're looking at problems that we know we've solved, and sometimes we're tackling problems that potentially have never been solved. When you're looking at the more of the impossible problem, something that's like been a barrier to bring to market and the challenges around that, maybe let's talk about what that looks like and how software engineering is different in that case.
Bringing something new to the market. I think it depends on multiple factors, and a lot it depends on what part of the market you are in and what you're trying to do and how. So, for example, if you're in financial services, a lot of what you do will have to do with data. Same with insurance. And so if you're working with data, you need to have a lot of data. Sometimes that's a challenge for startups. They can create a great technology, but if they don't have a data that the technology would use to produce results, there is not much value. At the same time, some companies that's been on the market for 60, 80, 100 years have a lot of data, but they're stuck with old technologies and can't move fast enough. And that's not because they're bad. It's because when they develop those technologies, they have to constantly look back and see how do what I develop work with what I already have, instead of moving forward, looking forward and moving forward.
Absolutely. And I guess, in the insurance space, for example, you mentioned, aligning your premiums with the individual driver a little bit more tailored. And I guess with technology and what's available, there's more data points to be able to model that differently. I guess maybe if we were to go back 20 years ago, there had to be more general models. You fall into these couple different buckets and that kind of is what it is. You mentioned data. When you look at insurance and what the company's doing, does that additional data now, and obviously we have a lot of different pieces of technology within a car, mobile devices, all these different sensors and cameras. Is that what's allowing a company like Quanata to actually bring some of those impacts to market?
Absolutely. If you think about car industry itself, you used to buy a car and you would say, I want a car of this color with these parameters. But now more and more of the parameters in your car become not a physical characteristic, but a software feature. And the more it becomes a software feature, the more flexibility you have, but the more information it is available about your car. I think there was a lot, if you remember about a year or year and a half ago, there was a lot of controversy around people's driving data, and it's definitely very valuable. But if you think about it, cell phones. and you use Google Map or any other mapping applications all the time, and the data about how you drive is already out there and available. So in Quanata case, people are using an application to track how they drive. And this allows also to distinguish if you are the driver or your passenger.
Interesting. So I guess, when we're talking about like, you're able to take some of these various pieces and package them together and provide that solution. I guess from your perspective, I mean, you're the head of software engineering. I'm sure, when you're tackling these type problems where it's like, we're actually trying to do things that we haven't had a chance to do before. We're actually going to develop solutions that shift the needle on how somebody pays their premium on insurance. I guess when it comes to R&D and just giving the team time to actually figure these things out, is that something you have to plan for? Is it something you put on the roadmap? I mean, some people go, oh, it's a hackathon, but if innovation is a part of your company, maybe you need more than a hackathon.
I think it's a little bit of everything. Quanata started as a true startup. When I joined a couple of years later, a lot of code was developed organically. And organically developed code means something that was developed unplanned, very intuitively by the first few developers without probably giving a lot of thought, not to the infrastructure, but infrastructure as well as growth and how things may look like in the future, and what are we going to do when requirements start changing or something like that, and how are we going to make the system more flexible. They just needed to deliver fast, and it was a massive monolith, and every time you touch something like this, you fixing something in one place, high probability you'll break something in another. So even in startup, we actually had to have a project around re-architecture, where we look at the architecture and we thought, how do we really need it to work, and how do we make it not an application, but more a platform, insurance platform, where we can have flexibility, we can configure it based on different states and their states requirements, and how can we enable development of other products potentially based on this platform.
Interesting. And I guess as you're kind of looking at what the evolution, the shifts. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of shifts happening within engineering, right? Various coding tools that are out there, lots of different language models you can adapt and use, and various other things that you need to bring innovation to the market. As you're kind of seeing all these play out, do you think about how to incorporate those into the team? Do you it's funny, so you talk to different people. One person would be like, hey, listen, my team goes out and tries all these tools and brings them back. Then the other is like, well, I like to, as a leader, understand what the impact of my team is before I introduce a tool. And somewhere in between, I guess when you're seeing all these different tools coming out, hitting the market, how do you approach evaluating, adopting to what's out there in the market?
In engineering, you have people working there, and as all people, we will have different personalities, and we will have people who wants latest and greatest and try it yesterday, and people who would be much more cautious and say, hey, let's see what can it do for us. I think one of the biggest concerns with LLM and AI lately have been around security, and how do we make sure that our data doesn't leak out. And we do have security and governance functions in place that make sure that everything is standardized, properly configured, and people are educated how to properly use the tools. I've been since the first since the first appearance of ChatGPT. We probably all have been through our personal ups and downs when it first came out, and you start looking at it and you go, oh wow, that's so cool. right? And then you start using it more and more, and you start seeing all these flaws and understanding and the lack of context, and their response being maybe overly wordy and things like that. And then you get a little bit more pessimistic, and then things improve, and you start seeing people doing more and more. And I think a lot of it has to do with how people use it and how people train them.
Absolutely. That's actually a really good point. And when you're looking at, some of these technology shifts and I guess, sometimes you have to do POCs for solutions. You have to start out someplace, see if it's possible. When you as an engineering leader are looking at POCs and trying to set expectation of the stakeholder to make sure you're on the right path. Obviously, we're asking the stakeholder to come along that journey. There's always a potential misalignment of what a POC should look like, right? Because I think sometimes stakeholders have different expectations. How do you work to establish that, understanding that what we're showing you as this POC is just proof that we may be able to do this? How do you approach that?
I think before doing POC, we actually clearly understand, we make sure we clearly understand what the goal for this POC is, and if what we are building is just experiment to see what happens, or if what we are building might become a foundation for something in the future. And in this case, we probably would approach things a little differently. At least we'll put different things into design considerations.
Absolutely. I guess when you're looking at the solutions that you guys are building and you're looking at, how much code you guys test, how much code goes into production, do you guys track the amount of POCs, the amount of code that is going into production from some of those, and again, I guess with what you guys are doing, so as a true startup, you guys organically grown, is there need to do a lot of POCs at this point, or POCs less important at this stage of your at the company?
I think it depends. In spite of being a startup, we are in insurance industry and we are very heavily regulated. So we are mindful of that. So it depends, I would say, on goal of POC. If the goal of POC is, can this technology work? It can be something very simple, run by engineering, and if we prove, yes, it can work, then at that point, maybe governance team kicks in and we make sure everything's aligned. If it's a business POC and they want to do it, then again, it depends what they're trying to do. We have, for example, with our high road insurance business line, we do a lot of experimentation and a lot of challenges for the drivers to try and help them to improve their driving habits, like don't pick up the phone while driving, etc. And we have a framework that we developed to quickly deploy those challenges in mobile apps, and some of them run for a little while, and we just look at the results and see if it's helpful. Maybe we'll incorporate it. If it's not, we let it go. But it's we have a framework that optimized specifically for things like that. Or we can have a hackathon, and if somebody comes up with a great idea, then later that idea can go into production.
Absolutely. And, I guess when it comes to, are you guys actually, when it comes to AI coding tools, are you guys seeing any success with it? Are you guys seeing anything going into production? Or are you guys still just early stages? Where are you with the adoption of those tools for the engineering team itself?
The tools are available to engineering team. Different engineers and different teams use them in different ways. There are certain places where they're proven to help a lot. Certain places where not so much. But we absolutely have to let our people do it and use them for a variety of reasons. Number one, if you don't let people do it, they'll find places where they probably will. And number two, if you don't do it and you don't experiment with it and play with it, you're left behind. And we don't want to. Do I believe that at some point AI will replace all the development efforts? No. Do I believe that like it will be one developer doing a job of what 10 used to be? Also no. What I believe is that the code is well documented, understood, well structured, and well architected. It will allow your development team to move forward very fast.
Absolutely. I like that. That's a fair assessment. And I guess as you're kind of looking at the company and the mission itself, I mean, obviously, you're bringing you bring a different model to the industry. You have to account for it, with different expectations. When you are, and obviously in the insurance space, there's, a certain amount of, a certain amount of pace of development in general. When you're looking, you mentioned like context-based insurance, that context, I mean, I guess there's a lot of opportunity how to enhance that context, how that context grows. As you mentioned, more data points are available. As you kind of look at the business and innovation itself, and you look at the industry, how do you guys align? Is there an expectation? I guess let's say in the auto insurance industry, is there an expectation of the pace of development? Is Quanata moving faster? How does the industry react to that?
I think in terms of speed of development, I think we are moving very fast. And to be fully transparent, Quanata is fully owned by State Farm. So we don't only just do that insurance lines that I mentioned. We also do some technology R&D that sometimes used later by State Farm.
Very cool. Very cool. I mean, that's interesting to see the work kind of bubble up into, like a bigger company like that as well. So I think that's got to be pretty interesting to see. When it comes to, obviously you've been there for a little bit. When it comes to the industry and kind of the rate of innovation that you've seen, you've been there, I think close to 4 years. When you look at the rate of innovation, when we typically think about insurance industry, you guys are a little bit different. You guys were a startup, you got acquired. Is there, when we think about insurance and insurance tech, is it a stigma? Is it a stereotype to think that the insurance industry innovation is low? Is there a case of, depending on the size of the company, the particular part of the insurance industry, you can have, some of this type of innovation?
I think it depends. And when I say that, I think it depends on multiple factors. Insurance is very heavily regulated, and another complication there is it is regulated by state. So in every state, you may have some different requirements. Then there are different types of insurance. Even if in car insurance you have commercial, you have personal, etc. So it also adds a level of complication, and that's probably partially why it is perceived as slow and sometimes conservative. But I think there is a lot of technology innovations happening in insurance space as well. Even when I was working in financial services, where everybody were talking about fintech, and I'm hearing about insurtech lately. And there is if it's an industry that existed for a while and is perceived to be relatively slow moving, then it means that there is an opportunity for innovation and speed up there.
I like that. That's actually really, it's interesting. I actually do see a lot of innovation in these pockets, health tech, insure tech. I spoke to somebody recently who they're building an AI for primary care to solve some of that bottleneck. And you would think, there's other, you think that we figured everything out and then there's something else. And I think within insurance, it's such a rich industry, such Yeah, innovation. I think a couple of years ago, my friend had a claim with the insurance company, and he was taking all the pictures himself and uploading it to an app, and it was just such a shift in terms of how you interact, that level of service. And I guess when we're thinking about having the data and then having the technology to bring that solution, you guys obviously are wholly owned by a very large insurance company, but something where a lot of us probably, and I think going back to the original conversation, is when a lot of us see our insurance bills, we're always like, well, seems unfair. When you're using the context-based, technology to actually help bring and lower some of those costs, that's got to be a good feeling, because it's a common complaint. No one likes no one likes their auto insurance, regardless of who it is. We all think it's too high all the time.
It is a good feeling, and another thing, we run a lot of challenges, and a lot of innovation we're looking at is around safe driving and not texting and driving and using your cell phone around driving. And I think if we can prevent just 1% of the drivers in the world not to use a cell phone and not to get into the car accident, think how many lives we can save, considering the numbers. There is a lot of opportunities to do something good in this space.
I was going to ask you a question, because when it comes to technology, when it comes to cars, there's so much. And if you're driving, let's say something more modern, let's say even an EV or a car that has cameras on it, because all these cars now have cameras to tell you, don't do this, don't do that, all this, potential helping you drive assist better. With all those data points, I would envision the future of insurance should be changing, because we actually now know, does a car just sit there? Before, you'd fill out a form saying, I drive 6,000 miles a year, 10,000, I want a discount because I'm not driving it as much. With all this data that you guys have at your disposal, I guess when you think about your work and you think about, what you can potentially do, your relationship with the product team has to, maybe it's a little bit different, because you're getting all these different ideas of things that we can do, things that we can improve for our customers. Is that relationship, when it comes to going back to some of this POCs and R&D and the work, that relationship with the product team, what does that look like within the insurance space for a company like yours?
Company like mine, we are very closely aligned with the business, and everything that the business do, we are getting involved because we are implementing it. I think we talked about POC before, and if you look at the statistics, and there is a lot of information about it. I think there was a pretty loud article, I believe by MIT Research, could be wrong, that out of all the proof of concept done with AI, less than 10% goes live, so 90 do not. And you start thinking, why? And there could be multiple reasons. But also, if you think the code that AI would produce, all those vibe coding, which is really cool, and that's probably something they can create in applications that would run. But there is a lot that's happening on the back end of this application and background that you don't normally see. And if you want to present this application to people, to wide audience, you need to ensure that it will be able to handle the load of that audience. It needs to be sure that it's well architected and designed. And if something goes wrong, there is a recovery path, right? High availability disaster recovery have been words in IT for many, many years, and they're not going anywhere. We've just last week had a major AWS incident. Then there was, I believe, Microsoft Azure incident. They will keep happening. So how do you architect and design your applications so it keeps working? You fail over to another region or whatever. If some backend component of that application goes down, what do you do? All these things are not considered in AI code. What you get is a pretty picture, and functionality is not always really properly connected.
Absolutely. That's actually very true. That's a good point. I think it's an interesting space, especially when we start thinking about insurance and how each of our cars is becoming more of a data repository with how much data it produces for everything. You mentioned our cell phones, our mobile phones just being in the car itself using Google Maps or something similar provides all that data back. I think it's interesting because that's when you started, you can start pushing the limits of what you can deliver, the limits of what was possible before. And I think, when it comes to insurance, maybe that's actually opening up some doors to innovate in ways that as consumers, we don't typically get to see.
I just like to mention that your data and users' data is taken very, very seriously by all the insurance companies. And again, your driving data is not shared without your consent by your car producer company with insurance or with anybody else. So everybody who, for example, uses Quanata high road insurance, they would know exactly how their data is obtained and used, and they have full control over it.
Absolutely. So I was going to say, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. If somebody does have a question, a follow-up question, something that they want to ask you, is there a good way of connecting with you?
LinkedIn probably would be the best.
Okay. All right. So there you go. If you have a question for Svetlana, LinkedIn is the best. Again, thanks for coming on the show. And that's it for this episode. We'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think we talked about innovation. We talked about POCs. The insurance industry there's a lot of innovation happening right now. We just talked about a couple with Svetlana, and she talked to us a little bit about how innovation is transpiring within her space. So please share this episode with somebody else who might find it beneficial and interesting. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.